Hi guys, how are you? Hilda Navas. I attend this church, as many as you know. Today, we want to talk to you guys about heading to college, about what your plans would be or should be, and what worked for us. As my co-host, I have my childhood friend, Guillermo Gutierrez. We've been knowing each other since I was 9 years old, and he went to college, but he took a different career path than I did. So we want to compare the two and share what worked for both of us. So we're going to give you a little background. So, Guillermo, share your background.
Sure. Hi, guys. It's nice to meet you. So I was born in Venezuela. We moved to the United States when I was about 8 years old. So I started elementary school here in the U.S. in Houston. From there, I went on to middle school, where after attending the bilingual classes, I moved into pre-AP classes. After that, I went into high school into AP classes and graduated from Westside High School. We graduated from the same school. After that, I went to the University of Texas at Austin, where I studied petroleum engineering and economics. Since then, I graduated and have been working as a drilling engineer for Shell Oil Company for the last about 8 years as well.
Okay. And a little background about myself. I came here when I was 9 years old from Honduras with my parents. Been here ever since. And like Guillermo, I went to elementary, middle school, high school here, graduated from Westside High School in 2006. And then I went to ACC to do my basics, and then I transferred to the University of Houston for my bachelor's in architecture and minor in construction management. So that's a little story, our background. So this is going to be very interactive. I'm going to be asking Guillermo questions. He's going to be asking me questions. And we just want to make it fun, nothing formal. So, Guillermo, how were your high school years? Did you have a plan? Did you knew since freshman, this is what I want to do? Or how did that work out for you?
So I wouldn't say that I had a plan. So because I was in AP classes, so I was in the pre-AP classes, they tend to be very competitive, as that is where a lot of the students that end up graduating at the top of the class are taking those advanced classes to get a higher GPA. And because of that, there was a lot of conversation as to where were you going to go to school, what were you going to study, et cetera, to keep people really engaged and kind of competitive into where they were going.
Was it
So
the teachers or within the students having these conversations?
I think it was both, right? Like, so you would always, of course, have a lot of teachers asking you that because the teachers are teaching the classes that are meant to give you college degree credit, right? So AP, if once you take the exam at the end of the year, if you do well enough, you can get credit for school. And it honestly is a very cheap way to get credit hours. And
Free?
it, yes.
It's a free?
No, it's not free. So you do have to pay a fee
To
but
take the exam.
to take the exam. You can
Okay.
take the classes for free. And the advantage of taking the classes is that you get an extra point in your GPA. So you always end up, even if you do lower in a class, they usually have more weight towards a GPA than a regular class, which is advantageous to getting a higher GPA. And it also looks better in college applications as they get more weight than regular classes. I would say that by being in those classes, the conversation was always both ways. A lot of the kids do always have the plan, so they always want to sort of be the more competitive one and try to get into the best school they can. I would say that also one of the things that I realized is that at the time I didn't have a plan because I was also undocumented at the time. And so I did not really understand how I could attend college, particularly any college that would be out of state or any college, any private college. One of the things I learned about was the House Bill 1403, which is a bill that was passed, I believe, in 2005 here in the state of Texas, so that any non-citizen can attend school, right? Basically, they have about, I think it's 3 different requirements. One of them is that you graduate from a Texas high school, that you hold a Texas permanent address for at least 3 years, and that you fill out an affidavit saying that when eligible, you will apply to be a resident. You submit this to the college of your choice that is in Texas, and they allow you to attend school paying in-state tuition, which is really important because it is approximately a third of what out-of-state tuition is, right? So
per this bill, everyone, it's allowed to get accepted into any college.
Yes.
By law, you cannot get denied if you're undocumented.
yes, you are not allowed to deny someone an education in the state of Texas based on their immigration status. That is essentially what this bill allowed. And it was how I applied to school. And there is a way to submit it, I believe. You would have to follow the application process, but there is a place in which you submit the extra documentation for it. And they allow the application process to be looked at. I would say that I didn't have a plan aside from really talking to the counselors that were in our high school to kind of get an idea for which colleges were what and kind of get a little bit more familiar. So I think with that, and even just with the couple friends that I had, was kind of how I started learning a lot more about what colleges to go to. If I didn't know what major I wanted to do, or any of that was all decided after. What about you? How was your experience? How did you decide what to study?
So, my experience was the complete opposite than Guillermo. Um, I really did not have a plan, and nothing went as planned in my high school. So, instead of hanging out with the right crowd or being in AP advanced classes, I was hanging out with the wrong crowd. So,
Well, we were hanging out with each other, so I don't know.
right. So, this was the good in my crowd. So, for me, I think I didn't have a plan. Ever since I was little, my parents would instill in me that I had to go to college, that I had to get an education. So I knew I wanted to go to college, but to say I had a plan or I knew how the process worked, I didn't. And I think that's kind of what's different between the Latin community and the Anglos, because I feel like, you have the white kids and the white parents who are like, I went to UT, so they're pushing their child to go to UT to be part of the sorority, and they know how the process works, they know how the application works. And my parents migrated from Honduras, they had no idea how the process, so it's like you don't have that at home. So for me, I hung out with the wrong crowd. I was in pre-AP classes, I think my sophomore year, and then I got kicked out because I started skipping, hanging out with the wrong crowd. And I think my junior year, my dean called me in. I didn't even have a relationship with my dean. He called me in and sat me down and pretty much told me, you need to get it together. And he scared me. So I got it together. Not as together as in apply for colleges. I thought I knew I wanted to go to college. I graduated from high school and my plan was to go to a community college. Because the whole thing I had in my mind was money. How am I going to pay, or my parents going to pay for these classes? 2 weeks after my graduation, I found out I was pregnant. So then that threw all my plans, or whatever plans I had, off. But it was a reality check. And that's what my parents pretty much said. You stay home with us, we'll support you. And I went to ACC, did my basics, and that was my plan. I think once I got to ACC, or once I got pregnant, that's when I was like, I need to develop a plan. I need to have goals. I need to figure out what I want to study and how I'm going to get there.
So that's one thing that I found out afterwards too, is a lot of students, particularly a lot of Hispanic students, we don't have that background, right? So a lot of the kids that I went to school with, their parents were all graduates. Many of them had advanced degrees, had graduate degrees, were all professionals. So they were telling their kids, you need to go to X, Y, and Z school. And many of them, that's why they were also so competitive. It's they wanted to not just do that school, they wanted to go to the best school they could get into. And that just really made it so that everyone kind of was competing with each other, which is very different than what we see in a lot of other places too.
Yeah. So guys, what you learn from this is surround yourself, if you're in high school, surround yourself with those students that have your same goals.
Yes.
Push yourself. Do pre-AP classes. I know it may sound like so boring or tiring, but that's gonna help you to get ahead in your college. So like Guillermo, he had no idea what he was getting himself into. He didn't know how to do it, but he surrounded himself with those students, and that's how he learned.
I think it's also important to ask for help. So, like, your experience was with your dean, right? Like, he called you in, but that's what they're there for. They're supposed to help you. I had instances where I needed help, and they gave it to me. So, it's really important to talk to your counselors, to talk to your dean, talk to your college counselor, and even some of your teachers. They'll help you figure it out. Many kids don't know, and all they need to do is ask. So just going off of that, and being called in and having what happened to you in your situation, having to go to HCC, why did you decide to go down the path of going to HCC first versus just enrolling in a 4-year university?
So for me, it was money. I knew classes at ACC were cheaper. I know they were easier, as in the professor might not be easier, but the classes are smaller. So you get to learn better. You're like on a 30 people student class instead of 300 or 150. And also, I had a child, so I was like, I can't just go full on 100% university. And at this point, I really didn't have an idea what I wanted to study. And I knew I also needed to work on my GPA, bring my GPA up from high school if I wanted to transfer to a university. So for me, it was money, easier, convenience. And that's why I chose to go to ACC. And I know you took the opposite route. You went straight to UT University. Did it ever cross your mind to go to ACC? Or since you were surrounded with the students that were like, I'm going to go to this college, this is what I'm going to be, that was your goal?
So I have always been, for my academics, I have always been really competitive. So I had thought of it as a choice because of my status and because of money, but I always wanted to go to the 4-year university. And for me, I was able to graduate in the top 10% of my class, and so I, at the time, was able to get automatic acceptance to any state school here in Texas. And because of that, I was able to get automatic acceptance to UT and to Texas A&M. And that's why I went directly. So because of how well I had done, I was able to also apply to some financial aid, which we'll talk about, and scholarships. And it wouldn't make sense for me to have gone to HCC. I did do a couple classes at HCC because it was easier to get credit. They were smaller classes. And so for me, taking those classes at HCC was actually better than taking them at UT. So I would take them during the summer. as well. So, but I think the fact that I graduated where I did and at the ranking that I had made it easier for me to just make that decision, right?
To go straight to the
To go
university.
straight to one, yeah. So there was no real question in that part.
So guys, you have options. You can either go to HCC, go to a community college, or go straight to the university. I feel like some students, they're like, oh, I graduated with a very low GPA from high school. I can't get accepted into any university. It's okay. Go to a community college and start building your GPA from there, from scratch. Yes, they're going to ask for your high school transcripts, but what's going to count were your classes you took at the community college. So don't ever feel like because you graduated with a low GPA or an average GPA that you're stuck. You're not stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of resources out there. As I mentioned, even after high school, there is financial counselors, admission counselors, academic counselors, all of which should be able to help you. And if one doesn't help you, go to the next one.
And they're
Right.
there to help you. That's their job.
That is what they get paid
So
for.
don't feel like you're being annoying. Don't
Yeah.
feel like it's like embarrassed, and be honest with them. Whatever you're going through, tell them, this is my situation. This is what I
Yes.
need. What can you guys do for me? How can I get this help? They're there to help you guys. And I know I've been there where you're like embarrassed. Like, I don't want to say I have a child at 19.
Yeah.
But that's their job. And they're there to help you, and they're willing to help. You're pretty much giving them something to do.
Yeah.
So we talked about community college versus university. I wanted to ask you, how did you choose to go to a public university instead of a private university? Was that based on how much money you were getting, or how did, like, if someone had that opportunity, if they should go to a private or public, what would you tell them?
So for me, I only applied to 3 schools, right? I only applied to Texas A&M, UT, and Rice. I didn't get accepted into Rice, which looking back on it was a great thing because I would have wanted to stay. But one of the things I wanted out of going to college was to move away and to sort of have that experience that you kind of see in the movies and whatnot. So I was like, why not? If I can get someone else to pay for it, I will do it. So it made more sense for me to go to a public school. And since the other 2 that I applied were public schools, they were also cheaper, right? And that's one important thing to think about when you're deciding where to go, is how much is that degree going to cost you at the end of the day, right? And whether or not you'll be able to pay it back, once you start working, or if you're able to get scholarships to finance it. So it made more sense for my situation to go to a public school. And additionally, the packages that I got from the schools that I applied to, from A&M and UT, were both much higher than what I would have gotten from Rice. I actually have friends who applied and got into some other private schools and ended up going to the public schools because the difference was just too much in terms of cost.
Okay. So if
Yeah.
you were going to a private school, it would be like double the cost.
It can be either double or 3 times the cost depending on where you apply. So
So if you have all the money in the world,
yeah.
go
Do
to
you?
go to a private college. But I feel like some people are like, they care more about the name of the school they're going to.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from my field, you're going to get paid the same if you graduate from this college that's private than this college that's public. In my field, do you feel like that's how, which is architecture, do you feel that's how engineering is? Like, per se, if someone graduated with your same petroleum engineer from Rice, would they have gotten the same offer you got, or do you feel like they have an advantage?
So yes, I don't think there is difference in terms of how much I got paid versus how much someone had they gone to a private school. I think if you are considering that, you should. It depends on what you want to do. There are some companies when you graduate have what they call target schools, and I've been in recruiting, so I've seen just kind of how we make the plan, and they choose a small number of schools, but those generally include public state schools. So you should not define that as your decision, as a way to decide where you're going to go. I think also it really depends on what you study. So the University of Texas, where I graduated from, has the number one petroleum engineering program in the country. So it's literally the best program in the country to go to. So it doesn't matter whether I had gone to a private school, I still went to the best program for that major. And a lot of different majors have both private and public schools that are the top 10 in the country or the top 15 in the country. So it really depends on what you want to study and how, I guess, recognized that program is. And that the recognition of the program affects how many people come recruit, but that also does not mean that you will automatically get paid more. And if it does, that will only likely apply for your first 2 or 3 years of career. It doesn't.
After that.
Yeah, after that, it's completely depending on
how much you truly know about your field.
Yeah, and how well you work.
Yeah.
That's another conversation.
So for me, I went to ACC, and I think that's when I realized I wanted to do architecture.
Yeah.
I researched like you did.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to study, architecture. So let me find out what schools. Obviously, I had a child, so I couldn't go out of state. I couldn't go out of the city. So I looked within Houston, what were the good architecture schools. And it was the University of Houston and Rice University. Obviously, I didn't even apply. It didn't even cross my mind to apply to Rice. I went to the University of Houston. But I wanted to talk to you guys about that process, about transferring from a community college to a university. And I feel like if you're going to go to a community college, like Guillermo said, choose what you want to study. Do your research. So I did my research, University of Houston. So I started meeting with the University of Houston Architecture Program advisor. And I want to tell you guys, I met with her at least 5 times before I even got accepted into the program, telling her, okay, what classes can I take at community college? What basics do I need?
Yeah.
Because you also don't want to be taking, calculus credit that you don't even need for architecture.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you want to have a plan. You want to go meet. If you want to go to UT, drive to UT and meet with an advisor for engineering and ask them, give me a plan. What classes do I need? What GPA do I need to get into the program? And guys, I honestly believe that's why I got into the program. Like, I made myself known, and I feel like this lady, once she saw my name, she's like, oh,
She really wants
She really wants it.
Yeah.
She really wants to get in the program, and I got accepted. So I applied for the architecture program. You're only allowed to apply on the fall, and I got rejected. And then you have to wait another year. It's not even a semester.
Yeah.
So then I had to wait another year for the following fall to apply, and then I got accepted. So it's okay to get rejected. Like, take it as a challenge. Take it, okay, I'm going to take more classes at community college. Or I even started taking architecture classes before getting accepted into the program, which were like introduction to architecture, that anyone's allowed to take it. You don't have to be accepted into the program. So I would drive all the way to U of H just for one class. And also, I think that showed them
Yeah.
that she wants to be in this program.
You proved that you were good enough to get in
Yeah.
based on your performance. Yeah.
So that's what they want to see. You can't just say, I'm going to apply and sit around and see if you like get an
Yes.
answer.
Yeah. So that actually, I think two things that are really important that you mentioned there is one, if you don't know what you want to study, use your time wisely, right? Try to figure out what you want to do. Try to figure out what kind of career you want to do. And that doesn't mean you will have to go to a four-year college. So that may also mean there are other types of careers that you can choose where there are more trade schools, etc. But use the time to figure that out and reach out to people. There is, I think, not just at the time, so we're talking about 12 years ago. So technology isn't where it is now. Right now, you can literally call up a admissions department and say, I'm interested in this. What can you tell me? Who do I talk to? They will put you in touch with students, with alumni. They have info sessions. They will call you themselves. There are many ways in which you can get information and learn more about what they can offer you. So it's important to remember in that, right? So I guess given the choice that you made and the careers that you wanted to go into, how did you decide on, and how did you manage to finance your degree, right? Because architecture is not a cheap degree to get. So how did you figure that out?
Yeah, so at HCC, I pretty much paid out of pocket. I don't know how much classes are now, but I want to say back then it was between 300 to 500 per class. So my parents did help me out, but I was also working. So I was working full time. I actually took a semester off when I have my child, and that whole semester I worked full time. I saved money because I had a C-section. I really wanted to go to college, but I couldn't. So at ACC, we were paying out of pocket. Either my parents were helping me for part of it, and then the other part I had a job.
Yeah.
When I transferred to the University of Houston, that's when I was like, why am I paying a fee for the wellness center and this and that? And I'm like, what are all these fees that I had no idea what they were about?
Yeah.
So that's when it hit me. I'm like, how am I going to afford this? And like Guillermo, I was undocumented. I couldn't get loans. I was confused. So I applied for TASFA, which you're going to talk about it, but that's money that they give to undocumented students. I applied for that, so I received that help. I continue working, even with, for you guys that don't know much about the architecture program, is super intense. I pull all-nighters left and right. But I knew I had to continue working. So I would work on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then go to school Monday through Thursday. And that's how I made it. I took out 2 loans towards the end. And it was because my last semester, they didn't give me that much help. And so I took out 2 loans, but we haven't really touched the topic of loans.
Yeah.
But I paid those off ASAP.
Yeah.
How did you finance it? What would you advise? How did you do it?
So I did the same thing to start. As I applied to school, I was undocumented. So when you're undocumented, that means you don't qualify for federal aid, right? So
which is FAFSA.
Which is FAFSA, yes. So that stands for federal financial assistance. I think it's what the official name. But that's FAFSA, FAFSA. That's the application to get federal loans or to get federal grants. So, but because Texas passed a law that they are allowing what they call non-citizens or non-permanent residents to apply to school, they also have a pool of money that they give to students that are undocumented, which is TAFSA, right? So you apply to TAFSA, and through TAFSA, it allows you to get Texas grants and Texas school aid. And so those were the two sources that I got for the government to apply. Now, my recommendation with those is apply to them as early as you can. So you generally apply for financial aid around January or so. I think is when the applications open up for the coming fall. So I would do it as soon as they open. You need to make sure that you have your parents and your tax information updated, because if you don't, that money runs out, and it's a lot less than federal aid, so, and it runs out quickly, right? So you need to make sure that you have that money assigned to you when you apply and show that you have federal need. The other things I did is I honestly just Googled scholarships that I qualified for. I think one thing that's important that we haven't mentioned is that as a minority person, right? So if you're Hispanic, Black, whatever, in science careers, there aren't too many people graduating from our ethnicities in those. So there's a lot of scholarships out there that are really encouraging for people to apply to a science-based career. So what we call a STEM career. So it's science, technology, engineering, and math, right? And I think for women it's even higher because, for example, for us, we had, I think the average engineering school had less than 10% of the graduates per year that were women, which is essentially about less than 10 people out of 100, right? So very, very, very small number of women are graduating. So there's a lot of scholarships.
They want to give
for
money to minorities.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have a computer or most of you have a phone, spend your time Googling minority scholarships for whatever major you're in. And those were really all the ways that I did. I think something that you will find out later as you start school is there are a lot of scholarships and a lot of aid that the school is willing to give you if you're doing well and that are specific to your major, or at least that's what it was for me. How was it? Was that the same for you, or was it all just general aid?
For me, it was all general aid. I really did not apply to individual scholarships, but I know they were out there.
Yeah.
I just dropped the ball, but they're out there, and I know plenty of people. I know my close friend who I did architecture school. She did not pay 1 penny throughout her whole college. She even had extra money to eat and to buy whatever books she needed. So I know the money is out there. So would you say you should figure out what you want to study first before you go after scholarships, or what would you be your advice on that?
I think my advice is do well. It really doesn't matter what you're studying. So it does matter what you're studying, right? So if you're studying science, like I studied engineering. So if I'm studying engineering, there's a lot of options for minorities in engineering. So that is really helpful. But if you don't know exactly what it is, just do well and do really well, because that makes you competitive towards a lot of general scholarships, because there's also a lot of general scholarships out there, but they tend to be, if they're not specific, they tend to be much more competitive because everyone can apply to them. So my one advice is, no matter what you're doing, do really well on it. Like, do it the best that you can as you figure out what exactly it is that you want to do.
So, any final tips you have? I know you just said do well. Anything you want to share with them? And I just want to make it clear, this is for if you're in middle school, high school, if you're even out of high school. There is no age limit. So don't feel like, oh, they're talking about taking AP classes in high school and I'm already out of high school, so I'm going to ignore everything they said. No, this is for everyone. And I want to make it clear that it's never too early to start planning. Like, a fifth grader or too late. When I was in college, there were a couple people in their 40s and they got their degree and they're making money now. So,
Yeah.
do you have any final thoughts, tips?
So I will also second that. I think you can learn a lot of stuff no matter what time of your life it is, right? So my sister, for example, was not in all AP classes as I was. So she also went to HCC and she had to figure out the system as she was in it. So I had the chance to kind of learn a little bit about it because of where I was before I got in it. She had to jump in it and figure it out from there. So she did that. She went to school for about 2.5 or 3 years at HCC and then transferred to a school. So there is no timeline of what you should do. There's always an option to figure out where your path should be, right? So I will say that the only way to figure it out is by asking people. By asking people questions, by talking to the counselors, by listening to this kind of thing or to this kind of video and asking us questions if you have any. There's a ton of information out there that you can literally sit down and instead of being on Instagram, you can just get on Google and figure it out, start figuring it out from there. So I would say is take the time to figure it out because it does take time. It takes time to figure out scholarships. It takes time to fill out applications. It takes time to go to school. So be willing to put in the time and you'll see the.
So another thing I wanted to touch on when Guillermo and I met prior to recording, he mentioned taking it as it's a full-time job, guys. It's a full-time job to look for scholarships, to apply, to meet with advisors. Don't take it lightly. There are plenty of resources out there. Put your time, put your work into it. It's not going to come to you for free. We're going to provide with you guys resources. We're going to give you my email, his email. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, we're here to help you guys. We want to help you guys. I hope you guys learn from what we went through. And there's no such thing as a dumb question. You can ask anything and we're going to give you what our answer. If not, we're going to find an answer for you guys. We're also going to provide resources, websites of where you can find help, scholarships, and if there's another topic you guys want us to talk about or elaborate about or want us to come back to focus on this one topic, this was just a general on what I went through, what he went through. We're not trying to make you guys do something. We just want to push you guys to have goals, to want to do better, to want to have an education. It doesn't have to be a 4-year college degree education. You can get certified. You can do a trade program. There are options out there that are shorter. They might be a year, 2 years, and that's another thing we can talk about. But we just want to push you guys to have goals, and the sooner you have these goals, the sooner you'll be able to accomplish them. I want to thank you guys for joining us. I want to thank Guillermo for being here. Thank you, Guillermo.
Sure, thank you
You're
guys.
more than welcome to come if I ever come back. But thank you for joining us.